Hello and welcome. So today I've been sent an early access key to Industrial Annihilation, which is the love child, I would say, of Planetary Annihilation, being from the former devs, but also Dyson Sphere program. I think that's probably the closest mix. It's an RTS cum automation game, and it's a really interesting concept. And I've been really excited to have a go at this, and I want to preface this video by saying it is very early access. If you're someone who isn't interested in checking out early access games, don't buy the game. I want to be openly clear. This is one of those games that really has a lot of potential, and I feel that if you check out the game now and you're not interested in the early access journey and coping with bugs or dealing with the game in its current stage, it's going to put you off from playing this game when it's ready to be released. But I have spent several hours. I've been a little bit frustrated because, as you will soon see, the game lacks any kind of tutorial. There's not any real in-depth explanation as to anything. You're given objectives to do in the current campaign, and you kind of just have to work your way through it. And now that I have spent the time playing it, I'm starting to enjoy it. But because of that, I felt that I had to open this with this message. And here we are in game. So we have the option to join a multiplayer game. Unfortunately, I've had no luck actually getting into a game. All of these games are just 1 of 2 players, and you can host your own game, and it's just free building essentially. So it can be a nice way to get to grips with the game, as the buildables aren't locked behind any of the missions. And speaking of missions, we do have 4 available, which cover the theme of the game. So you have harvesting resources, producing and using ammunition whilst maintaining a factory or base, factory automation, and attacking the enemy base, which we'll cover shortly, as I feel this is the closest true representation of the game. Now this here is the first mission, and looking back at this, I feel I'm very much at a disadvantage having not played Planetary Annihilation. But equally, I feel this allows me to give you guys honest feedback as to why players may have difficulty with this, because it's not player friendly. We're given tasks but no clear tutorial to teach us. For example, the buildables can only be built with the commander or smaller bots, and even then they only work if they have access to the resources and storage, and without an in-depth breakdown of all the keyboard settings, you're very much left guessing. On top of this, there have been a few bugs where if you click on a resource node with your commander, the game locks and you have to restart, and then I've had crashes as well. Now when it comes to harvesting resource nodes are similar to that in Satisfactory, in that they produce an infinite amount of resources, but the amount of nodes on a map are finite. Placing an extractor on them allows you to harvest the node, but you cannot connect conveyors directly to ports. Instead, it plays more like Dyson Sphere program, in that you can drag stretch ports between buildables and conveyors to transport the resources. Now the game also feels slow at times, but there's no obvious way to increase the game speed. Apparently this can actually be done by pressing plus or minus on the numpad though, which I found out 2 hours into my playthrough. We also have various commands on the right hand side which are for your units, but how to use them is not apparent. For example, setting up a logistics line between a truck and various warehouses, you need to hold shift whilst ordering the truck to pick up and drop off the items at those designated spots. And I feel this makes the game that much less accessible for non-Planetary Annihilation players. And when you're releasing a game like this, where you have the complexity of advanced based logistics, whereby you're not just sending a harvester to collect resources from an ore patch. I mean, in this game you have 8 base resources, followed by the complexity of producing items. So there's a lot to play around with, and you really need to be able to understand how the logistics work. You need to break it down to the player base, or they're just going to give up and move on. And I don't want to be harsh on the game. It's definitely got promise, but I very almost gave up on this myself after playing this mission and even persevering through. It makes it obvious that the game is even more difficult without a good user interface, which we'll talk about shortly. And this is even more apparent in the final mission, where you have to assault an enemy facility which is already established. Now, I've had great difficulty with this mission because I've been attacked numerous times and locked out of resources prior to building up my economy. That particular bug, I'm happy to say, is being fixed currently though. Thankfully, I've worked out that you can pause the game by slowing the game down, but without build holograms showing when paused, it's not half as useful as it could be. Now in this game, I'm trying to set up my basic automation as quickly as possible so that we can build laser towers and some vehicles to face off the enemy. And I'm setting this up using a familiar bus line with all resources flowing through the center. From the build menu, you can see we have a good amount of buildables to play around with, but it becomes apparent here that the biggest flaw to the game currently is the lack of an intuitive build system. Again, this could be because I haven't played Planetary Annihilation, but I feel if there's an intuitive system in play, we should have some kind of tutorial or breakdown in the game. Building is slow in this, and that's normal for an automation game. You can take your time with factory design, and that would be fine if build holograms showed whilst paused, but they don't. So you're playing against an opponent who's already ahead of you in producing units, and now having to fumble about selecting the commander or the bot, then selecting the buildable and placing it. And if I place it in the wrong spot, I have to find the item in the menu again. This is particularly infuriating when conveyors show up as an illegal placement constantly, and when it comes to the factory buildings, there's no way to copy and paste recipes, making it a slow process. Now, I should mention that on the roadmap they do have schematics, which I presume are a bit like blueprints or will act like blueprints, and that should definitely help when it comes to building. But at the moment, it very much feels like a slow and clunky process when an RTS at its very nature is quite fast paced, and I feel it'll take a lot of work for anyone to play competitively against an AI opponent. At least in PvP matches, both players will be fumbling about, struggling. But for me, there needs to be so many improvements to this build system. There needs to be a way to copy and paste recipes, copy and paste buildings, quick select buildings such as using the number keys, though this is normally reserved for controlling groups of units. And on top of that, the schematics, pause holograms, and easier ways to select and deselect a buildable. There should be the ability to drag and place multiple buildings at once, or at least have snapping guidelines so that you know everything is in line. It just doesn't make it as enjoyable as I want it to be. And that's unfortunately but half of the problem. The lack of an intuitive UI makes understanding power horrible. I've no idea when to add more power without hovering over the power plant or waiting until the outline of buildings are subtly flashing red and orange, which confuses me. Why isn't there a simple lightning bolt overlaying the buildables? It feels like they're trying to take on a lot of new mechanics, combining the two genres, and at the same time reinvent the wheel. And infuriatingly, looking at the actual trailer that they showed off, there is a UI that makes so much more sense than what we currently have. So why wasn't that brought in for this if they already had this planned? Perhaps there's a way to show an overlay to give you a quick idea as to what's going wrong in your base, but if there is, I've no clue how to. And buildings then flash red when they're lacking an input or their outputs are full, which took me another half an hour to work out. And you have to deal with all of this whilst you're also being attacked, and it's barely playable once you build units as the game drops from 60 frames per second to about 12 FPS. So it definitely needs a lot of optimization as well. And also I should mention a note on graphics, because they have mentioned this. They've said that they will be improving the graphics. This is just the kind of the bare bones that they've got on the go at the moment. I should mention with all of this, they are very active on their Discord and they are very helpful. So if you are playing the game, do join their Discord so that if you need the help, it is there. I want to love this game, but it very much feels like you're being thrown into the deep end. And though I do like that for some games, I think releasing this early into early access in its current form feels less about them wanting feedback, because there is just so much work that is needed and is apparent. And I don't think my criticisms are particularly special or unique. These are things that anyone playtesting the game without previous experience playing Planetary Annihilation should spot. So I'm moving to believe that the early access release was because they stated it would be available to backers of their Kickstarter as early access in 2024. Perhaps development hasn't moved along as quickly as they were expecting, and releasing it at the end of 2024 keeps the community happy. But to me, this feels like it needs a lot more time in the oven, and I'm concerned it's going to do more harm than good releasing it in this state. I know for myself, after half an hour of playing, I wanted to quit the game, and I'm glad that I pushed on through. Like I said, I truly believe this is a diamond in the rough, and I love the concept, but I highly recommend only purchasing this if you're really willing to wait a few years for it to really shine. But I'm going to leave it there for this one. Let me know your thoughts if you've played it yourself, and if you'd like me to keep you up to date with its development, and if you think my criticisms are fair. I don't want to be overly negative. I do think this has a lot of promise, but it's too early for me. But guys, until next time, thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much to all of our supporters on Patreon, most notably our Lunar Eclipse patrons, Firefless, The Calamity, Ben and Star, and our Blood Moon of the Day, which today is King Zoron. Until next time, as always, ciao for now.